Behind Biden's reversal on Hyde Amendment lobbying, backlash and an ally's call. Atlanta when Joseph R. Biden Jr. took the stage at a fundraiser that drew many African American Democrats Thursday night, he was under siege over his support for a measure that prohibits federal funding for most abortions. Black women, including on his own campaign staff, were urging him to reverse his position, pointing to restrictive abortion laws passed in Georgia and in other southern states. He was facing then there were pleas from longtime allies, like Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, who conveyed to Mr. Biden's campaign that in this fraught moment he should reconsider his decades-long support of the measure, known as the Hyde Amendment. Mr. Biden told the attendees at a gala dinner hosted by the Democratic National Committee in Atlanta that he could no longer support Hyde a reversal from his position the day before when he instructed his staff to say he backed the measure. If I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code, His sudden turnaround illustrates his larger challenge as he runs for president for a third time with his long legislative record, an instinct for moderation and consensus. He is running headlong into an energized base that has grown far more liberal in the decade since he became vice president. And his initial reluctance and then hasty acquiescence on Hyde also underscored the degree to which his own impulses are driving the campaign as he grapples with how to retain what he and his advisors believe is his biggest asset, his reputation for authenticity amid the scrutiny and pressures he faces as the front-runner. A Roman Catholic, Mr. Biden has spent decades straddling the issue of abortion, asserting his support for individual abortion rights and the codification of Roe v. Wade, but Mr. Biden, his allies acknowledge, had plainly misread what activists on the left would accept on an extraordinarily sensitive issue. For all his reluctance, he came to this decision on his own. Nobody pushed him, said Representative Cedric Richmond of Louisiana, his campaign co-chairman who went on CNN Wednesday night to defend Mr. Biden's support for barring federal funds for abortion services. A senior campaign official, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss private conversations, confirmed that it was Mr. Biden himself who first reaffirmed his support for the Hyde Amendment and then decided to flip his view. His staff laid out, Mr. Biden initially believed his party would offer him forbearance on such a complex, difficult issue. But by Thursday, as abortion rights groups expressed their displeasure publicly, officials at organizations such as Planned Parenthood and NARAL, Pro-Choice America as well as senior Biden campaign staff members were privately lobbying him to change his stance. Our commitment to economic justice, racial justice, is all tied into dawning awareness that Hyde has to be repealed, said Ilis Hogue, the president of NARAL. The salience of the organizations that support abortion rights say the issue of access to abortion has come into sharper focus for voters, especially for Democratic women and women of color, crucial constituencies in the 2020 presidential primary, amid Republican efforts to enact far-reaching anti-abortion laws across the country. With the attacks we're seeing, there's no way that this election won't be about access to health care, said Kelly Robinson, the executive director of Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Biden's actions, those state measures seemed to be on Mr. Biden's mind Thursday afternoon when he held a private roundtable discussion with African American community leaders and elected officials at the Gathering Spot, a co-working space and private club prominent in Atlanta's Black community. He did not discuss the Hyde Amendment explicitly, several attendees said. But as the he didn't say, and that's why we had an abortion law, but everyone knew what he was talking about, said one attendee, said Frank Ski, host of the V103 morning radio show in Atlanta. Around 3 hours later, Mr. Biden stood at a gala that capped a day-long African American Leadership Summit and walked back his support for Hyde, pointing to extreme laws in states including Georgia. After his appearance, he spoke on the phone to Mr. Coons, who repeated what he had conveyed to Mr. Biden's campaign earlier in the day. With these state laws moving quickly and these anti-choice judges being named, it's important for us to articulate that we oppose the Hyde Amendment, he told him. In an interview Friday, Mr. Coons said the environment nationally and in the states has changed, and that Mr. Biden understands that. Coloring Mr. Biden's approach to the abortion issue has been a larger concern, held by the former vice president and his closest advisors, about the implications of Mr. Biden spending too much time reversing or expressing remorse for his past policy stances. Before entering during his speech in Atlanta, Mr. Biden took pains to state explicitly that he was not repudiating his previous stance on abortion funding and would make no apologies for it. "This is about health care, not politics," a Biden spokesman, T.J. Ducklow, said in a statement Friday. "We're in an Mr. Biden's aides believe that he is broadly acceptable with the party's rank and file, no matter what the loudest critics on Twitter may say, but even they concede that he must move on some issues to accommodate where Democrats are today." Indeed, his reversal on Hyde is the second time his campaign has signaled a preference for caution, but quickly realized how difficult that is in this political environment. After an advisor, yet even though Mr. Biden is at odds with his party's liberal wing, he still notches high poll numbers, is poised to raise as much as any of his rivals this quarter, and continues to rack up endorsements. The debate over Mr. Biden's position on the Hyde Amendment, a Biden advisor said, had been underway inside the campaign for some weeks as his team works on a proposal that aims to expand health care access. Some in the campaign, other supporters of the former vice president, speaking on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the subject, were frustrated that he shifted on an issue in which polls show most general election voters agree with him. One high-level Biden. Separately, Michael Ware, an anti-abortion Democrat who served in the Obama-Biden administration, expressed exasperation that his party was not attempting to seize the mantle of moderation on abortion at a time when Republicans in states like Alabama are seeking to ban the procedure, even in cases of rape and incest. Given the extremism of the Republican Party right now on this issue, are pro-choice women really going to stay home because we support the Hyde Amendment? Mr. Ware asked, but just as Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, you like Mr. Biden a practicing Catholic, you dropped his support for the Hyde Amendment after Hillary Clinton put him on the ticket 3 years ago. Mr. Biden had little choice now, his supporters said. Mr. Trump's presidency and the prospect that legalized abortion could effectively be on the ballot in 2020 has further reduced tolerance for deviations from orthodoxy among abortion rights leaders. As one Biden advised, there's more sensitivity because of the all-out assault on a woman's right to choose from every direction, said Representative Karen Bass of California, who heads the Congressional Black Caucus, citing state legislatures, the courts and the Trump administration. And if you're talking about
raindrop, truck top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.